Hi everyone. As what I want to write in my final paper, I'd like to talk about the macroeconomic issues and phenomena that happened because of the pandemic of COVID-19. Also, I will analyze it by using some macroeconomic models that I learned during this class. COVID-19 is causing a range of serious health, social, and economic problems. The economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic goes far beyond the impact of the pandemic itself. Concerns have shifted from supply-side manufacturing problems to a decline in services businesses as the coronavirus had spread around the world. The pandemic has caused the worst global recession in history, with more than a third of the world's population in lockdown. Supply shortages are expected to affect many industries due to panic buying. Increased use of goods to combat the epidemic, and factory and logistics disruptions. Price gouging happens from time to time. Uh, it may also lead to improper trading of materials, thus affecting social order and other problems. In the process of recovery and containment, there are serious and widespread uncertainties in the world economic system. Economic forecasts and consensus among macroeconomists show significant differences in overall scope, long-term impact, and expected recovery. Also, risk assessments and contingency plans must therefore be taken with a grain of salt, as opinions differ widely. COVID-19 related job losses offsets 113 consecutive months of job growth, with total non-farm payrolls falling by 20.5 million in April. The impact of the pandemic on world GDP growth has been enormous. The COVID-19 global recession is the worst since the end of World War II. According to the World Economic Outlook for April 2021, released by the International Monetary Fund, the global economy will contract by 3.5% in 2020, uh, down 7% from the 3.4% forecast in October 2019, while almost all countries surveyed by the IMF record that negative growth in 2020. The decline was more pronounced in the world's poorest regions. The effects can be long-lasting, while the global economy is expected to recover this year. Gross domestic product levels in developed, emerging market, and developing economies are expected to remain below pre-virus baseline levels by the end of 2021. Besides, the epidemic has triggered a health and financial response unprecedented in speed and scale. In 2020, global financial support amounted to nearly 16 million trillion, about 15% of global GDP. However, the capacity of countries to implement these measures varies greatly. Um, and to talk about the macroeconomic topics, first, the supply and demand and the COVID-19 shock. The COVID-19 has had a clear impact on supply, like insulation, plant clothes, supply chain disruptions and impaired liquidity have clearly affected production. The impact on demand is harder to measure. Changes in real commodity prices can indicate whether COVID-19 has had a significant impact on demand. Specifically, if the aggregate supply effect were to dominate the demand effect, we should see prices rise as economic activity declines. Aggregate demand will also be significantly negatively affected by the spread of the virus if prices remain largely unchanged. Also, information on the consumer price index was not available for months because of the statistical and economic lag. The only timely alternatives are raw materials prices and break-even inflation expectations. In addition, the speed and strength of the recovery will largely depend on the ability of governments to obtain and roll out COVID-19. The median output loss in 2020 is estimated at about 6.5%, and the gap is expected to narrow to about 4% of the pre-pandemic trend by the end of 2021. Also, COVID-19 has disrupted the economy and is spreading globally. The evolution of the disease and its economic impact are highly uncertain, which can make the formulation of appropriate macroeconomic policies challenging. The findings suggest that even if the outbreak is contained, it could have a major impact on the global economy in the short term. In all economies, especially those with less developed healthcare systems and higher population countries, greater investment in public health systems can significantly avoid economic costs. The economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic cannot be overstated. For many economists, the economic crisis is one of the most pressing and important issues in their lifetime. Consider epidemiological assumptions based on past epidemiological experience and translate shocks into economic shocks, thus reducing labor supply, like mortality in each country, and increasing operating costs in each sector, including disruption of production networks in each country, reduced consumption due to changes in consumer preference for each commodity from each country, as well as model changes based on changes in income and prices. The equity risk preeminence of companies in each sector in each country rise based on exposure to disease, and also increase country risk preeminence based on disease exposure and to changing macroeconomic conditions. We need a range of policy responses, both in the short term and over the next few years. In the short term, central banks and finance ministries need to ensure their disrupted economies can continue to function while the pandemic continues. Also, facing with reality and physical pressures, government has a key role to play, while interest rate cuts are the likely response of central banks. And the shock is not just a demand management problems, but multifaceted crisis and requires monitoring, physical and health policy response, insulating the affected and reducing large social events are effective responses. Um, so to conclude, this is what I want to write in my final paper. But because 10 minutes is too short and it cannot contain too much words, so I would write specifically in my final paper. Thank you.